14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez died as a result of multiple penetrating injuries. That's according to the official autopsy from the LA County Medical Examiner released Wednesday. That autopsy found Rivas Hernandez suffered from 2 penetrating wounds on her torso and dismemberment in several areas, with her official death ruled as a homicide. Authorities believe 21-year-old David Anthony Burke, also known as the singer David, brutally murdered and dismembered Rivas Hernandez's remains last year. The official autopsy was completed in December of 2025, but officials noted a court order prevented its public release.
On September 8, 2025, workers at a Lowe's Angels Tow Yard were going about their routine. Impounded vehicles lined the lot, abandoned cars, unpaid tickets, the usual. Among them sat a 2023 Tesla Model Y, white, unremarkable, registered to an address in the Hollywood Hills. It had been flagged as abandoned and towed weeks earlier. Nobody had come to claim it. But something was wrong. A smell, faint at first, then unmistakable, had been hanging over the vehicle. Thick, heavy, the kind of smell that makes your stomach turn before your brain even catches up. And then there were the insects, crawling along the seams of the front trunk, clustering near the edges where the hood met the body of the car. When investigators finally pried open that trunk, what they found inside would send shockwaves far beyond Lowe's Angels. A black cadaver bag, slick with moisture and swarming with insects. A detective, steeling himself, partially unzipped it. Inside was a head and a torso. Beneath that bag, a second one. Arms, legs, severed, carefully separated from the body they once belonged to and sealed away in darkness, left to decompose for months in the California heat. The remains belonged to a 14-year-old girl named Celeste Rivas Hernandez, a child from a quiet immigrant family in Lake Elsinore, about 90 miles southeast of Hollywood. A child who had been reported missing not once, not twice, but 3 separate times in the final year of her life. A child the system had lost track of. And the car. The car belonged to one of the fastest rising stars in modern music, a 20-year-old singer-songwriter who had amassed hundreds of millions of streams, collaborated with some of the biggest names in the industry, and built a fan base of millions. His name is David Anthony Burke. You might know him as D4VD. This is not a story about fame. This is not a story about music. This is the story of how a teenage girl walked into a house in the Hollywood Hills on April 23, 2025, and was never seen alive again. And what happened next would remain hidden for months, buried beneath grand jury secrecy, sealed autopsy reports, and a wall of silence, until the truth finally clawed its way to the surface. To understand how Celeste Rivas Hernandez ended up in the trunk of that Tesla, you have to go back before the discovery, back before the grand jury, back to a girl who, by all accounts, was slipping through the cracks long before anyone with power thought to look. Celeste was born to Salvadoran immigrant parents and raised in Lake Elsinore, a small, sun-bleached city nestled in the inland valleys of Riverside County. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where families hold tight to each other because they've already crossed oceans and borders just to be together. And for the Rivas Hernandez family, Celeste was everything. But something changed. According to the Riverside County Sheriff's Office, Celeste was reported missing 3 times in the final stretch of her life. 3 times her family reached out, desperate, hoping someone would bring their daughter home. The first disappearance blurred into the second into the third. She last ran away in April of 2024 when she was just 13 years old. Her family heard from her for the last time in May of that same year. After that, silence. But Celeste wasn't gone. Not yet. Surveillance footage and digital records would later confirm she was still alive as late as January 2025. She was out there, somewhere in the sprawl of Southern California, beyond the reach of the people who loved her most. The question that would haunt investigators, journalists, and eventually millions of people around the world was a simple one. Where was she, and who was she with? The answer, according to prosecutors, is David Anthony Burke. D4VD wasn't always famous. Born on March 28, 2005 in Texas, he rose from bedroom recordings and internet uploads to become one of the breakout voices of a new generation. His music, dreamy, emotional, drenched in reverb and longing, resonated with millions of young listeners. Collaborations with artists like Lofi, Holly Humberstone, and Kali Uchis cemented his place in the industry. His tracks landed on major playlists, in video game soundtracks, on festival lineups. He was living the dream that millions of kids his age only fantasize about. But behind the streams and the sold-out shows, prosecutors allege a far darker reality was unfolding. According to the criminal complaint filed by the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, Burke engaged in continuous sexual abuse of Celeste beginning in September of 2023 and lasting until at least September of 2024. She was under 14 for the entirety of that alleged period. The nature of the relationship, prosecutors say, involved repeated lewd and lascivious acts that Celeste herself witnessed and could have testified about. And that, the prosecution argues, is exactly why she had to die. District Attorney Nathan Hochman laid it out in stark terms. Celeste, he said, had become a threat. Not a physical threat, a reputational one. She knew things. She had seen things. And at some point she threatened to go public to expose what Burke had allegedly done to her. If that happened, everything, the record deals, the streaming numbers, the collaborations, the career, would collapse overnight. So on April 23, 2025, prosecutors allege Burke invited Celeste to his home in the Hollywood Hills. It was the last day anyone would see her alive. What happened inside that house remains, for now, behind the curtain of sealed court documents and grand jury proceedings. But what came after tells its own story. Celeste vanished. Her family, already worn down from years of searching, had no idea she had walked into that house. No one reported her missing this time because, tragically, she had already been missing for over a year. And in a quiet tow yard across the city, a white Tesla sat baking in the sun, waiting. For months, the world had no idea what was hiding in plain sight. After April 23, 2025, Celeste Rivas Hernandez simply ceased to exist in any record, any camera feed, any digital footprint. No phone activity, no surveillance sightings, no social media, nothing. A 14-year-old girl had vanished from the face of the earth, and the silence was deafening, but only if you were listening. And for a long time, almost nobody was. Meanwhile, David Burke's life carried on. The music kept streaming. The brand kept building. Whatever had happened inside that Hollywood Hills home was locked behind closed doors, and the clock was ticking on a secret that was slowly rotting, quite literally, in the front trunk of a 2023 Tesla Model Y. At some point, the car was reported abandoned. Maybe it was left on a street. Maybe it sat too long in the wrong parking spot. The details of how it ended up in a tow lot are mundane, almost laughably ordinary for a case this dark. But that's how it goes sometimes. The most horrific discoveries don't come from brilliant detective work or dramatic breakthroughs. They come from parking violations and tow truck drivers just doing their jobs. When the vehicle was impounded and brought to the yard, no one thought twice about it. It was just another car, just another case number. But the smell, that smell, was impossible to ignore forever. And on September 8, 2025, investigators arrived to find out what was producing it. What they found inside that trunk changed everything. 2 black bags, a body, dismembered and decomposed beyond easy recognition, sealed away for months in the suffocating heat of a California summer. The arms and legs had been severed from the torso. The remains were covered in insects. Whoever had done this hadn't just killed a person. They had taken the time to cut the body apart, bag it, and store it like cargo. The remains were transported to the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's office. Identification would take time, but when the results came back, The name attached to those remains was Celeste Rivas Hernandez, 14 years old, missing for over a year, found in a car registered to one of the most streamed young artists in the country. And then something unusual happened. The investigation went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that means nothing is happening. The kind of quiet that means everything is happening, just behind closed doors. The Los Angeles Police Department moved swiftly to lock down information. In November 2025, detectives obtained a court order placing a security hold on the medical examiner's entire case file. The autopsy results, the cause of death, the manner of death, all of it was sealed by Superior Court Judge Craig Richmond. The medical examiner's office actually pushed back, legally challenging the order, but the seal held. Whatever Celeste's body had revealed about how she died, authorities were determined to keep it secret. Why? Because a grand jury had been convened. Throughout November and into the months that followed, an investigative grand jury began quietly hearing evidence. Witnesses were called. Testimony was given behind closed doors. Executives from Burke's record label were brought in and questioned. Robert Morgenroth, the general manager of Mogul Vision, Burke's management team, testified and was asked about the singer's movements and how the case had been handled internally. The grand jury's existence was supposed to be secret, and it was until February 2026 when it was blown open in the most unexpected way. Burke's own family, his mother, father, and brother, filed objections in a Texas court after receiving subpoenas demanding they travel to California and testify. The filings revealed not only that a grand jury was active, but that David Burke was its target. The walls were closing in, and now the public knew it. For weeks, speculation swirled. News outlets connected the dots. Online communities dissected every detail. And through it all, Burke remained publicly silent, shielded by his legal team, including high-profile criminal defense attorney Blair Burke, a lawyer known for representing some of the biggest names in Hollywood. Then, on April 16, 2026, exactly 1 year and 1 week after Celeste was last seen alive, it was over. LAPD officers arrived at a house on Marmont Avenue in Hollywood. They placed David Anthony Burke under arrest on suspicion of murder. He was 21 years old. He was taken into custody without incident and held without bail. 4 days later, on April 20th, District Attorney Nathan Hochman stood before cameras and announced the charges. First-degree murder with special circumstances, continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14, unlawful mutilation of human remains, the special circumstances lying in wait, murder for financial gain, and the killing of a witness meant Burke was facing the most severe penalties California law allows: life without the possibility of parole or death. Hochman did not mince words. He told reporters that Celeste had been killed to protect a career, that a child had been silenced because she knew too much, that her body had been cut apart and stuffed into bags and left to decay in the trunk of a car for more than 4 months. The music industry moved fast. Kali Uchis pulled their collaboration from streaming platforms and publicly distanced herself, stating bluntly that Burke was not her friend. Laufey quietly removed their joint track. Holly Humberstone did the same. Italian rock star Damiano David re-released his album, replacing Burke's featured vocals with a solo version. EA Sports scrubbed Burke's song from the Madden NFL 26 soundtrack. Festival organizers dropped him from lineups. His label, Darkroom and Interscope Records, froze his career entirely. In a matter of days, D4VD went from rising star to accused murderer. His name, once synonymous with dreamy alt-pop and viral playlists, was now attached to one of the most disturbing criminal cases Los Angeles had seen in years. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, a family from Lake Elsinore sat in a courtroom, listening to a prosecutor describe what had allegedly been done to their daughter, and tried to make sense of a grief that no parent should ever have to carry. On Monday, April 21, 2026, David Anthony Burke walked into Department 30 of the Clara Shortridge Folds Criminal Justice Center in downtown Los Angeles. He was dressed in jail clothing, his wrists cuffed, his expression unreadable. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every available seat. Cameras clicked and whirred. Outside, crowds had gathered, some fans still clinging to disbelief, others holding signs with Celeste's name. Across the aisle from the defense table, Celeste's family sat together. They had traveled from Lake Elsinore to face the man prosecutors said had taken their daughter from them. A portrait of Celeste, young, bright-eyed, full of a life she would never get to finish living, was displayed during the proceedings. Her relatives arrived visibly shaken, and by the time the hearing was over, they were overwhelmed. Their attorney, Patrick Steinfeld, later told reporters that the family was devastated by the details they heard inside that courtroom. Details no family should ever have to sit through. Details about what was allegedly done to a child they had spent years trying to protect. When the judge asked for his plea, Burke spoke two words: not guilty. His defense attorney, Blair Burke, stood beside him and addressed the court with a statement that would echo through every headline that followed. The actual evidence, she said, would show that David Burke did not murder Celeste Rivas Hernandez and was not the cause of her death. It was a bold claim, the kind of statement a defense attorney makes when they believe they have something. Whether that something is enough to counter the mountain of evidence prosecutors say they've compiled remains to be seen. Because the prosecution is not holding back. In the days following the arraignment, details began to leak out from behind the curtain that had shielded this case for months. The previously sealed autopsy report was finally released, revealing that Celeste died from multiple penetrating injuries, a clinical way of saying she was stabbed, possibly more than once, with what prosecutors described in their filings as a sharp instrument. The criminal complaint includes a special allegation that Burke personally used a deadly and dangerous weapon to commit the crime. And then came the evidence that elevated this case from horrifying to almost incomprehensible. Prosecutors revealed that child pornography was among the key evidence they intended to present, material they say directly ties Burke to the sexual abuse charges and demonstrates the nature of his relationship with Celeste. This wasn't just a murder case anymore. It was a case about predation, exploitation, and the systematic abuse of a child who had nowhere to turn. But the defense wasn't backing down. In a move that surprised many legal observers, Burke's attorneys chose to exercise a right under California law that few defendants take advantage of: the right to a preliminary evidence hearing within 10 court days of arraignment. Most defendants waive this right. Most defense teams want more time to prepare, more time to review discovery, more time to build a strategy. Burke's team wanted the opposite. They wanted speed. They wanted prosecutors to show their hand, and they wanted it fast. On Thursday, April 24th, exactly 1 year to the day since prosecutors say Celeste was killed, both sides returned to court. The prosecutor opened by acknowledging the date. 1 year since the death of Celeste, she said. We are eager to set this case for trial. A judge scheduled the preliminary hearing for the following week, an extraordinarily tight timeline that signals just how aggressively both sides intend to fight. And fight they will, because this case is not just about what happened inside a house in the Hollywood Hills on a spring evening in 2025. It's about everything that led up to it and everything that failed to prevent it. How does a 13-year-old girl get reported missing 3 times and still end up in the orbit of a famous adult? How does a child disappear for over a year without a single system? Law enforcement, social services, schools, managing to bring her home. How does a body sit in the trunk of a car for 4 months before anyone thinks to look? These are the questions that will linger long after the courtroom drama fades, because Celeste Rivas Hernandez was failed, not once, but repeatedly, by systems designed to protect children exactly like her, by a world that was too busy streaming music and building playlists to notice that a girl from Lake Elsinore had gone silent. David Burke may be presumed innocent in the eyes of the law. That presumption is his right, and it will be tested in the months ahead as prosecutors and defense attorneys battle over evidence, testimony, and the truth of what happened behind closed doors. The district attorney's office has not yet decided whether to seek the death penalty, a decision that will carry its own weight and its own consequences. But for Celeste, there is no presumption. There is no pending hearing. There is no next chapter. She was 14 years old. She walked into a house and she never came out. And now, a year later, the only thing left to determine is who is responsible and whether the justice system that failed to protect her in life will find a way to answer for her in death. This case is far from over, but for the family of Celeste Rivas Hernandez, the ending they feared most has already been written. If you've made it this far, I need you to do something. Not for me, not for this channel, for Celeste. Because here's the truth that nobody wants to sit with: Celeste Rivas Hernandez did not die in silence. She screamed. Maybe not literally, maybe not in the way we imagine, but she screamed in every way a child knows how. She ran away 3 times. 3 times. That is not rebellion. That is not a phase. That is a child telling the world something is very, very wrong. And 3 times the world heard her and sent her back into the dark. We build systems. We fund agencies. We pass laws. We tell ourselves that children are protected, that someone is watching, that the safety net will hold. And then a 14-year-old girl disappears for over a year, and nobody finds her until her body is pulled from the trunk of a car in pieces. So no, I'm not going to stand here and tell you to like and subscribe because the algorithm demands it. I'm going to ask you something harder. Remember her name. Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Say it out loud if you have to. Write it in the comments. Because in a world that will move on to the next headline, the next scandal, the next viral moment, she deserves to be more than a case number, more than a news cycle, more than content. She was somebody's daughter. She was somebody's whole world, and she deserved so much more than what she got. This case is still unfolding. The trial hasn't happened yet. Justice hasn't been served, not yet. And if history has taught us anything, it's that cases like this only stay in the spotlight when people refuse to look away. So don't look away. If this story meant something to you, share it. Not because it helps this channel, because it keeps her name alive. Because somewhere out there, right now, there is another child slipping through the cracks, another family filing another missing persons report that will sit in another stack on another desk. And maybe, just maybe, if enough people pay attention, if enough people demand better, one of those children makes it home. Subscribe if you want to follow this case as it develops. I'll be here, every hearing, every revelation, every twist, because somebody has to keep watching. But more than that, be the person who notices. Be the person who asks questions. Be the person who doesn't assume someone else will handle it. Because nobody handled it for Celeste. I'll see you in the next one.